Senator Joe Manchin will not be seeking re-election. The West Virginia Democrat made the announcement this afternoon. Here's a look.
I will not be running for re-election to the United States Senate. But what I will be doing is traveling the country and speaking out to see if there is an interest in creating a movement to mobilize the middle and bring Americans together.
Many have been speculating whether Manchin will run for president as a third-party candidate. Some say he plans to do so with the No Labels political movement. Today's announcement is yet another hint that Manchin might be aiming at the White House, writing he'll fight to unite the middle and repeatedly mentioning things such as the economy, the southern border, and overall safety in communities, all of which he says are neither Democrat nor Republican issues. Voters in the largely red state of West Virginia may elect a Republican to Manchin's open seat, possibly helping the GOP take control over the Senate. And the House Oversight Committee is issuing more subpoenas to key Biden family business associates, including Hunter Biden's art dealer today. What is the significance of the investigation into the president's family business dealings? Congressman Andy Biggs joins us to share his thoughts. Congressman Andy Biggs, thank you so much for joining us.
Steve, good to be with you again.
Great to have you, Congressman. Hunter and Jim Biden subpoenaed. Give us an idea. What actually prompted the subpoena? Take us beyond the headlines. Where is the smoke, and what do you think the fire ultimately is?
Well, so obviously, Hunter Biden and Jim Biden are the hub around the entire wheel that is spoked for the Biden crime family, the corruption that we've seen. We have literally received documentation for almost 24 corporations that appear to be shell corporations. There's no product that they're selling. There's nothing that's happening there, but money's being funneled through those corporations and into multiple bank accounts. We have tens of thousands of pages of bank accounts. We've seen suspicious activity reports from, I think the last count that I remember is something north of 175 suspicious activity reports from many banks about transactions to Hunter Jim Biden and Hunter Biden's business associates. We've seen money distributed through those bank accounts to family bank accounts from foreign entities, foreign nations, foreign entities, etc. And they all point to there's no way to explain it. And we've tried to get information and been unsuccessful. So we think that it's important to get these two individuals in, especially since we've had other testimony indicating pretty clearly that the product that they were selling was nothing more than Joe Biden and access to Joe Biden, which certainly seems corruption. We were told Joe Biden didn't know anything about it, but we have found checks going to Joe Biden of significant amounts of money, which correspond with payments by foreign governments or foreign individuals into these accounts. And I should stress, it's been foreign individuals, not foreign governments.
Congressman, if you could give us an idea of the significance, one thing that we've been hearing about is on those checks, the notation that it was for loan repayment and how that can provide kind of a shell from the IRS. And how do you think this will ultimately implicate the former president?
I think the president's already implicated with the evidence that we have, so I'll leave that there. But yeah, so everybody knows on a check you've got a memo line, and we have checks of $200,000, totaling of $200,000 going to Joe Biden that says loan repayment from Jim Biden and from Sarah Biden. Now, what's the deal with that? So, was it really a loan repayment? We don't know. And that's part of the reason we got to get him in here. But the second thing is, and it goes to the point you were making, is you can hide this much more easily if you're categorizing it as a loan repayment as opposed just straight up you're sending money in. But when was the principal paid by Joe Biden? How did he afford to pay for it? Remember, he was the vice president at the time. How did he afford to provide the principal amount upon which supposedly a loan repayment was made? Was it an interest-free loan? Did they declare it as income? Was there interest paid? What were the terms? Was there a document that indicates this? All these things go to whether this was an attempt to evade paying taxes, which would be another crime, on the part of the Bidens, whether it's Jim Biden or Hunter Biden or Joe Biden.
Congressman, I'll point out that you're also an attorney, so we're tapping into some of your law background here. My next question, I guess, is the polls are not too favorable right now for President Biden. Some of these new polls just released. Do you see a possible situation where the president pardons himself, his family rides off into the sunset, and how would the House GOP feel about that possibility?
Well, in order for him to need a pardon, you'd have to believe that the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, was going to bring charges against him or anybody in his family. There were some charges, misdemeanor charges were brought against Hunter Biden. He could pardon Hunter. He could actually pardon himself. I don't anticipate that is going to happen, but technically he could pardon himself and others, I believe. I think that some people would dispute that, but I think that there's nothing that proscribes that in the Constitution, and he's given pardon authority. Could he give himself carte blanche pardon authority going forward? I don't know. I don't know about that either. That's another question that is debated all across the legal aisle, but we'll have to wait and see. But he's not going to need a pardon if Merrick Garland is not going to bring charges. So the remedy for Congress is in impeachment, and even now I find that while the vast majority of Republicans believe that there's now sufficient evidence to impeach, I don't believe that all Republicans think that way, and so there's some that are going to be trying to prevent that from happening.
Congressman Andy Biggs, always appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
President Biden reacting to polls showing him trailing former President Trump in multiple key swing states. What's his response as he touts the UAW labor deal being reached? NTD's White House correspondent R-Ariz has more.
Traveling to Illinois on Thursday, President Biden touting the reopening of his Stellantis plant there and also a historic agreement reached between United Auto Workers and the big three automakers.
You saved the auto industry, and they should step up for you. The deal you reached set a new standard.
The UAW deal, if ratified, would give auto workers a 25% pay hike, better retirement benefits, and more. Back in September, in a rare move by a U.S. president, Biden joined a UAW picket line as some of the members were striking. The move is largely seen as an attempt to gain more union support. But the White House stressing this week that while President Biden shows support for striking members, does not mean that the Biden administration was directly involved with labor negotiations.
This is a victory for the men and women of the UAW. Obviously, we're able to give support to the negotiations, but they did the negotiations.
But despite the administration's efforts in touting its economic record, recent polls continue to show a lack of confidence in President Biden's handling of the economy. A recent poll by the New York Times shows that only 19% of registered voters think that the economy is good or excellent. The poll also shows a leading edge by former President Trump over President Biden in a potential 2024 rematch. But the White House insisting that the polls don't represent the reality or the future in 2024, adding that President Biden is delivering for the American public.
Why do you think it is being trailing Trump in all these swing state polls? Because you don't read the polls like
Reporting from the White House, R-Ariz, NTD News.
President Biden also hailing the tentative deal reached between Hollywood actors and major studios. He called it a good faith effort that allows our entertainment industry to continue telling the story of America. And how the House is faring under new leadership. 2 weeks after getting behind Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican lawmakers are having trouble agreeing on funding for specific budget items, setting up Congress for another last-minute face-off to avoid a shutdown next week. NTD's Melina Wisecup reports from Capitol Hill.
For the second time this week, Republicans were forced to skip a vote on a general government funding bill. Today's vote was delayed because of inter-party divisions over funding for the FBI and a specific provision meant to prevent discrimination against abortion supporters here in Washington. Here's what members had to say about it, leaving the floor.
The moderates are standing our ground. A lot of us in swing districts, and a lot of us that want to be very respectful of where the American people are and aren't on these social issues, are standing our ground and setting some limits as to what can get jammed into these bills.
Obviously, then we pulled them because we didn't have the votes. I think it's looking like we're still confused.
But one thing is clear from this week's lack of progress. That is that Congress will have to take up a short-term government funding bill to avoid a shutdown next week. Some Republican lawmakers have pushed for doing this in a so-called laddered approach, which would be handling it in piecemeal.
The benefit of doing the laddered CR is you're biting off a smaller chunk that you can chew instead of all 12 bills and some deadline that's not reasonable.
But Democrats are a hard no on this, and the Senate is already pushing for a clean continuing resolution, which is the status quo. In other news, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene today moved to force a vote to impeach DHS Secretary Alejandra Mayorkas after 2 people in her district were killed.
They shouldn't be losing their lives because illegals are trafficking more illegals into our country. So enough is enough. We can't wait anymore on Washington, D.C. No more strongly worded letters.
Her motion is a privileged one, meaning that lawmakers will have to vote on this when they return to the House next week. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.